That day, Seiya held a meeting with the employees, where he proposed the idea of having a football match at the amusement park. This suggestion certainly surprised everyone. Malful even asked if Seiya had lost his mind. Seiya explained a few reasons why he proposed football. The stadium in the south could be used for a football match, and it was the only way to attract around 100,000 people over the course of 10 days. Ashley then asked if Seiya was planning to host a professional match at the venue. Seiya confirmed this, explaining that the stadium had a capacity of 50,000 and that it was a great opportunity to boost the attendance numbers. Isuzu pointed out that based on the current attendance graph, it would be impossible to reach 500,000 visitors by July 31st, but by adding football fans, the number could significantly increase. Toriken mentioned that Seiya had instructed him earlier to gather information. Toriken had contacted several parties and traveled all over Japan. Hearing Toriken's complicated explanation, Isuzu immediately pointed her weapon at him, demanding he get to the point. Seiya explained that, in short, he had been searching for events that could utilize the stadium. Malful was surprised he hadn't heard of this earlier, but Seiya explained that he didn't want them to get their hopes up too soon. Toriken then shared that he had received news from a friend the previous night. The stadium owned by the Division 1 League club Grandilla Tokyo was undergoing repairs due to its poor condition. Because of the delays, the stadium wouldn't be available for the club's anniversary match on July 31st. The anniversary match was an annual event where current and former players faced off, drawing nearly 50,000 spectators. Seiya added that the club was looking for a replacement stadium, and he intended to offer theirs. Genjuro then asked if only licensed stadiums could hold professional matches. Isuzu clarified that it wasn't an official match, but they would still need to get permission. Seiya assured them that he would attend the meeting, and if they accepted, they would all be busy. The most important part was that the employees would be prepared. Afterwards, Seiya, Isuzu, and Toriken headed to the meeting for the stadium offer. During the trip, Toriken asked if Seiya was sure about choosing him to represent Amagi Brilliant Park. Seiya explained that the other party would likely look down on him and Isuzu because they were still in high school. Seiya then asked if Toriken had brought the charm, to which Toriken confirmed, making sure its true form remained a secret. Isuzu asked Seiya about the real chances they had, but Seiya admitted he didn't know. They finally arrived at the meeting room, where the other party read through their proposal for the stadium. Toriken asked for their opinion and mentioned that the Amagi Brilliant Park Stadium had a capacity exceeding the required minimum. The other party asked how long the stadium had been built, and Toriken replied that it had been about 20 years. They questioned whether the stadium was well maintained given that it appeared rarely used, and they also mentioned that the pedestrian access from the station seemed quite far. They then asked if the stadium could really accommodate 50,000 people. Toriken hesitated but assured them he would do his best. The other party pointed out the issue with the pitch, as football required a well-maintained grassy field. Toriken looked increasingly confused. They then inquired how they would manage the upkeep of such a multipurpose stadium. Toriken responded, explaining that he was the head of sales and didn't know the details. The other party thanked him and said they would contact them with an official letter in a few days, indicating that they weren't interested. Toriken tried to convince them to look at other documents, even going as far as begging. Seeing this, Seiya immediately stepped in to answer the questions that Toriken hadn't addressed. First, regarding maintenance, Seiya explained that the park staff regularly watered the stadium to keep it in good condition, and he assured them that if a match were to take place the following day, the stadium would be ready to use. Regarding the access, Seiya planned to ask the local bus company to provide shuttle services from the station. On top of that, Amagi Brilliant Park had 5,000 parking spaces. For the field maintenance, Seiya confirmed that he had an expert in the field. The field had natural grass that was perfectly maintained, so there was no need to worry. Seiya even offered for them to take a look at it in person to ease their concerns. The club representatives said that despite that, they were still hesitant to trust a venue with no prior experience hosting matches. Seiya then used his power to read the club's thoughts and discovered that they were facing a financial crisis, which was causing the delay in the field's construction. Seiya then offered to waive the stadium rental fees. He was even willing to fund the bus rentals, stadium security, advertising, ticket printing, brochures, and other reasonable expenses. The club representatives were shocked that Seiya was willing to cover all of these costs. Seiya said that Amagi Brilliant Park was willing to sponsor the event. Toriken whispered, asking if Seiya was sure about offering all of this. The club representatives then asked how much Seiya was proposing. Seiya showed them the cost breakdown, and the club representatives were surprised, wondering if the calculations were correct. Seiya assured them that there was no mistake, as it was a directive from their director. The club representatives said that while the offer was very beneficial for them, it would mean a significant loss of revenue for the stadium. Saya responded that the director's main goal was to attract a large number of visitors, and they had to welcome football fans even if their profits were reduced. Saya also requested that all attendees of the match must pass through the park's entrance gate, and of course, ticket holders would not have to pay an additional fee. Saya then asked if the club representatives wanted to inspect the stadium and the field first. On their way back, Torkin asked Saya if he was sure about offering everything for free, even though they didn't have the funds. Saya said that he had thought about it and assured Torkin not to worry. Torkin then asked what Saya meant by having a field expert. Saya explained that Amayi Brilliant Park had staff who were experts, including professional botanists. Terumi, Makaran, and Mawful were in charge of growing the grass on the field, but suddenly dangerous plants started growing and attacked them. Fortunately, Saya and Isuzu saw it happening. Saya then gave the signal for the clan of diggers to attack the monster plants, and the mission was completed successfully. That day, the club representatives came to inspect the stadium they were going to use. They checked every corner, including the quality of the building, the hallways, the food provisions, and the field. They were very pleased with the condition of the field, which was well kept, and the grass was in excellent condition. After that, Saya and the club representatives met again for a cooperation agreement. Before leaving, the club representatives praised the well-maintained field and invited Saya to work together. Both parties thanked each other before parting ways. Saya then asked Isuzu to gather all the employees on the roof of Maple Castle after closing, as it was time to share something important with them. That evening, all the employees gathered because Saya had something significant to announce. Saya told them that they would be selling the southern area, and that decision was final. He had already found a buyer who was interested, and once the deal was closed, Amayi Brilliant Park would receive a large injection of funds, solving their financial problems. The decision certainly surprised everyone, with some of them expressing hesitation because they were hoping that the amusement park would grow bigger, especially since the southern area was almost half the total size. For Saya, though, there was no such thing as the future, because before that could happen, the park would be closed, and what needed to be done right away was to survive, even if it meant eating one's own flesh. Mawful called it not a bad idea, and Meikaran also mentioned that owning land that couldn't be managed wasn't important. Terumi agreed with them, and so did Ashe, because it seemed like the perfect solution to their financial problems. The fairies also agreed, as the most important thing was that the park would continue running, and the employees would still work together. Sophie even said that sometimes sacrifices had to be made in battle in order to win the war. In the end, everyone agreed with the decision, and there were only 9 days left until July 31st. Meanwhile, Latifa was just listening from her room due to her health condition at that time. Saya mentioned that there were many things they had to do, and if needed, it wouldn't need to go home starting from that day. Everyone was fired up and ready to work hard. That night, everyone worked together, from fixing the stadium, putting up billboards, contacting clients, preparing new menu items, cleaning the stadium, technical work, budget planning, creating advertisements for the match, making tickets and brochures, distributing brochures, to arranging the spectator seating. Everyone worked so hard they were exhausted. The next day, Saya visited Latifa's room to check on her. Latifa asked how the preparations were going. Saya said it was troublesome, but all the employees had managed to handle it. Latifa was happy to hear that. Saya apologized to her about the decision to sell part of the property, saying that even though he had told her in advance, it was still an uncomfortable thing for her. Latifa asked why Saya was bringing it up again, since he was the manager of the park and everyone had to follow his orders. She also asked if there was anything she could do to help. She felt bad for not doing anything while all the employees were working so hard. Saya told her not to worry and that her job at that moment was to rest as much as possible. Latifa was about to argue, but Saya immediately told her that she had to follow the manager's orders. Latifa just smiled. Saya was confident that his touch would turn the park into gold. Then he suddenly remembered that starting in August, Latifa's memories would fade even if the park succeeded. Latifa asked him not to worry about it, as it happened every year. This was the way her life was. Every year, on the dot at midnight on August 1st, both her memories and her body would reset to the way they were the previous year. Last year, Mawful had explained everything, why Latifa was in the park, what had happened up until that point. Latifa had actually met Rubrum and the Digger clan long ago, but she didn't remember them. As long as the park was still there, Latifa would remain in that place forever. Latifa also said that even if Saya stopped being the manager, he would have to visit the park, often because she wouldn't forget how to make croquettes. Saya then said that he wanted Latifa to treat him to croquettes again. Latifa even wanted to take Saya on the Ferris wheel, but she forgot that Saya was afraid of heights. That day, Takaya came to meet with Saya. Takaya wanted to see the visitor calculations and also mentioned that Saya and the others had been working hard. The total number of visitors had already reached 445,027, and Seiya was confident they would meet their target. Takaya wanted to clarify that the deadline stated in the contract was exactly at 9 p.m. on the last day, with no extensions. Seiya replied that the soccer match would start at 6 p.m., and there was nothing to worry about. Takaya mentioned that he would send someone to the park at 9 p.m. that evening. Before leaving, Takaya said he couldn't wait to see how it would go. All the employees worked together to prepare for the match event, from practicing the attractions, rehearsing performances, preparing food, and many other tasks. Finally, the day arrived. The gates opened, and the show began. Visitors eagerly flooded into the Amagi Brilliant Park entrance, where they were treated to a performance by Mawful playing with small balls, Tirami performing flower magic, Macaron playing music, Wannabe and Mirai handing out balloons to children, and Dornell posing for photos with visitors. The fairies performed a dance show in the elementary area. Okura was busy directing vehicles for parking, while Seiya and Isuzu monitored the number of visitors. Isuzu commented on how many people had arrived, but Seiya was confident even more would come. Every ride appeared to have long lines, and Toriken was in charge of managing the queues at the attractions. Tirami was so tired from entertaining visitors on the train multiple times, just as Macaron had performed countless times in the theater. Mawful was overwhelmed guiding visitors to shoot at enemy mice. The pirate performance was just as packed, causing long lines. Bieno and Sheena even lost track of the orders because there were so many. From the kitchen, Nika shouted that their stand had run out of meat. He told them to buy 100 kilograms of meat at a nearby station, and they screamed in surprise. Wannabe was struggling to handle the many children who had gotten separated from their parents. That afternoon, all the employees were exhausted. They had never seen such a large crowd outside of Area 8 before. Tirami was so tired she couldn't move and hoped someone would give her a massage. Mawful mentioned that more people would come, and their battle was just beginning. Suddenly, the information center announced that there would be an additional show soon and asked the performers to be on standby. That afternoon, many buses brought visitors for the soccer match. They walked past the amusement park. Mawful was deeply moved by how many people had come and hoped that one day he could entertain that many people. Seiya and Isuzu continued to monitor the visitor count until the last group arrived. Seiya was shocked and immediately looked outside. All the guests had gathered at the stadium, and the parking lot was empty. It was 6 p.m., and the soccer match started, but the number of guests was still not enough. They needed 252 more people to meet their target, and there were only 3 hours left. That evening on July 31st, all the spectators had already entered the stadium to watch the soccer match. The stadium was packed with enthusiastic fans cheering loudly as the game unfolded. Meanwhile, Seiya and Isuzu were feeling anxious because the number of visitors had not yet reached 500,000 and there were only 3 hours left. Isuzu was puzzled as to why they were still short on visitors, while Seiya suspected that some spectators hadn't shown their tickets, even though their initial predictions had exceeded the target. Frustrated, Seiya admitted he had been too optimistic. Toriken informed Latifa that they still needed 252 more people to reach their goal by 9 o'clock p.m. Realizing how serious the situation was, Toriken was deeply concerned, while Latifa remained silent. Meanwhile, the performers were trying to come up with ways to attract more visitors immediately. The fairies even offered free entry to Amagi Brilliant Park to people waiting at the bus stop. Wannabe and Mirai went as far as begging pedestrians to visit the park, claiming it would help save the world. Mirai attempted to stop some women riding bicycles, but they declined, saying they were on their way to a family restaurant. Seiya, Isuzu, and Ashe called several people, offering free admission, but their efforts were in vain. Meanwhile, Eriko and the others tried persuading people near the train station. By 6:30 p.m., not a single additional guest had arrived. At that moment, Mawful and his companions approached Seiya, insisting that it wasn't over yet, and that they had to keep fighting, otherwise they would be looked down upon. Determined, Mawful called Savage Tavern and spoke with Takami, asking her to bring everyone there to Amagi Brilliant Park immediately, promising to cover all their expenses. Mawful then urged everyone to bring at least one person to the park, no matter what it took. Everyone scrambled to call every contact on their phones, pleading with them to visit the park. Macaron reached out to Amagi Salon, Tirami contacted Shizu, Muse called her grandmother, Kobora called her friends, and Salama updated her social media status, urging anyone with free time to come to Amagi Brilliant Park. Sylphie invited her fans to meet her there. Ashe also asked her friends for help. While everyone was busy making calls, Seiya still wasn't convinced that this method would be effective since they still needed 252 more people. Isuzu even messaged all the Amagi Brilliant Park performers, urging them to contact as many acquaintances as possible to bring them to the park. After receiving Isuzu's message, all the performers began calling people, pleading with them to visit Amagi Brilliant Park. Wrench called his acquaintances, Turaima reached out to his regular customers, and the same went for Tetsuhige, Injuro, and Jack. They all did their best to persuade people to come. Dornell even ordered pizza to be delivered to the park, instructing the delivery person to bring it through the front gate. Everyone gave their all, even shedding tears to bring in more visitors. Seiya tried calling Erisu, but she couldn't make it because the writer she was working with had arrived late. Seiya didn't have many friends from school, except for Mutsumi. Even though Mutsumi had shown clear dislike for him before, he didn't care and decided to call her. Mutsumi initially thought Seiya was calling about their past issue, but he quickly apologized and explained why he was reaching out. The soccer match had ended, and the time was now 8:40 p.m. All the performers lined up, anxiously waiting for more visitors to arrive. Suddenly, several taxis pulled up in front of the park. Takami had brought a group from the tavern. Mawful apologized to her, but Takami simply said she wanted to help her favorite customer. The next group to arrive was from the pachinko manager, whom Macaron frequently visited. Moments later, a group of furious women suddenly ran toward the entrance. It turned out that Tirami had told them their husbands were cheating on them. The enraged wives immediately started attacking Tirami. Macaron was stunned at how far Tirami had gone to gather visitors. Not long after, the husbands of those women arrived as well, and they all joined in on beating up Tirami. Muse's grandmother also arrived, apologizing for not being able to bring more people with her. Muse was deeply grateful to her. Next came Salama's followers, Kobori's friends from the Dujin Circle, and a group of enthusiastic male Silgirl fans eager to meet Sylphie. Mawful couldn't understand why all these men were swarming around Sylphie, but Macaron explained that Sylphie was actually an internet celebrity with over 1 million viewers. Aside from them, Wanipi, Wrench, and Ash's acquaintances also arrived. Time kept ticking and more visitors continued pouring in until only 8 people were needed to hit the 500,000 mark. Not long after, Mutsumi and her friends arrived, responding to Seiya's invitation. Seiya expressed his gratitude, and Mutsumi was surprised to see the uniforms Seiya and Isuzu were wearing. Without hesitation, Isuzu grabbed them and rushed them inside. With just 3 more people left to reach the goal and the deadline fast approaching, panic spread among everyone. They had run out of people to contact, and the players were filled with fear, making the atmosphere incredibly tense. Isuzu silently prayed for a miracle, while Seiya, feeling pessimistic, wondered if he was about to fail in saving Latifa once again. Just then, 3 mischievous little boys were seen being carried on a bicycle by their mother. These were the same troublemakers who had previously attacked Isuzu. The moment they spotted her, they bolted in her direction. Seeing this, Isuzu immediately tried to escape, but Seiya and Mawful held her in place. The 3 boys tackled Isuzu, and thanks to their arrival, Amagi Brilliant Park finally reached its target. Cheers erupted from all the staff, overwhelmed with joy and emotion. Their hard work had finally paid off. Everyone celebrated except for Isuzu, who was struggling to free herself from the 3 mischievous boys. Seiya, exhausted from it all, felt a deep sense of satisfaction and happiness, so much so that he could barely stand. Mawful approached him, offering a hand, and for the first time acknowledged Seiya as the savior of the park. Just as Seiya managed to stand up, his friends suddenly jumped on him, embracing him tightly. Toriken called it a miracle and said he'd be bowing gratitude repeatedly. Meanwhile, in her room, Latifa cried tears of joy as she listened to the cheers of celebration. She was deeply grateful to Seiya and everyone who had worked so hard to achieve this moment. That night, all the employees of Amagi Brilliant Park threw a grand party to celebrate reaching 500,000 visitors. Many of the park's issues have been resolved, ensuring that it would continue operating in the future. Now the only matter left was the land sale. Latifa joined the staff in taking commemorative photos, deeply moved by the happiness surrounding her. Suddenly, Seiya spoke up, addressing everyone. He announced that they had welcomed 54,976 guests that day. He then reminded them of his original agreement and formally announced his resignation from the park. Seiya admitted that when he first arrived, he thought the park was horrifying. And even now, he still found it terrifying. His comment made everyone burst into laughter. Seiya continued, saying they were lucky to have him since he was a genius, but even he couldn't have done it alone. He emphasized that reaching this goal was only possible because of everyone's efforts. Nearly tearing up, he expressed his gratitude. Seeing him like that, Isuzu suddenly started laughing, prompting everyone else to laugh along. Seiya quickly told them to shut up before revealing an important piece of news. He explained that they were close to finalizing the sale of the second park, with the land being purchased by Mole Mart, a massive supermarket chain with locations in multiple countries. Although the process would take some time, a gigantic shopping center would eventually be built next to the amusement park. When that happened, Saya was confident that the park staff would be able to attract even more guests, ensuring a strong synergy between the two establishments. He declared that when that day arrived, they would entertain their guests so well that they'd never want to leave. The players erupted in cheers once again. In the midst of the celebration, Saya spotted Takaya in the distance. He immediately approached him and asked what he wanted. Takaya called Saya the prophecy hero, leaving Saya utterly confused as to how Takaya knew about that. Curious, Saya attempted to read Takaya's mind, but Takaya instantly caught on, realizing that Saya was trying to use his telepathic abilities. Takaya mentioned that even though Saya had managed to reach the target number of guests, he had forgotten the main issue. Saya pointed out that no matter how many guests he brought in, Princess Latifa would still lose her animus, and once midnight passed, she would have to relive the same year all over again. Takaya even said that Saya was clinging to faint hopes, only to lose them again. And that was when true despair would set in, a never-ending cycle. Takaya suddenly transformed and attempted to attack Saya. Seeing this, Isuzu immediately fired her weapon. Malful arrived, furious, and swore that the next time they met, he would finish Takaya off. It was then revealed that Takaya was the very sorcerer who had placed the curse on Latifa. Latifa approached them at that moment. With only 0 minutes left before midnight, Latifa thanked Isuzu for helping her and expressed her hope that Isuzu would continue to support her until the very end. Isuzu promised that she would stand by Latifa's side for the rest of her life. Latifa then asked Malful to cut down on his drinking. Malful held onto Latifa's hand tightly, finding it difficult to part with her. Isuzu quickly led Malful away. Latifa then held Saya's hand and thanked him. She mentioned that Saya looked pale, but instead of his usual slightly arrogant response, he simply answered flatly. Seeing him in such deep thought made Latifa cry. She confessed that she didn't want to live like this, that she longed to spend an entire year with Saya and their friends. That night, she had witnessed a miracle, and she didn't want to lose a single memory of it. Saya immediately embraced Latifa, telling her that was all he could do for her. Latifa was deeply moved by his words. Then, as the clock struck midnight, something miraculous happened. Flowers bloomed all over the tree near the castle, and petals started falling gracefully to the ground. Even Saya wondered if that tree had ever bloomed so beautifully before. Saya picked Latifa up in his arms and walked over to Malful and Isuzu, saying that once again he had failed. But suddenly, Latifa woke up and called out Saya's name. Malful was stunned to see that Latifa still recognized Saya. Not only that, she remembered everything. Overcome with emotion, she burst into tears of joy. The blooming tree was called Elpis, and it used animus to make its flowers bloom. With all the animus gathered over the past 3 months, the tree had fully blossomed. That animus helped neutralize the curse on the noble princess. That meant that everyone who had enjoyed themselves at the park had completely saved Latifa. As they were about to leave, Isuzu called out to Saya. She referred to it as a farewell, but Saya simply said he was free from responsibility. He looked nervous and quickly left. Saya kept pedaling his bike toward home, and along the way, memories flooded his mind. His journey from the very beginning as the park's manager. He recalled all the moments he had shared with his teammates, from the struggles and hardships to the laughter and joy they had experienced while working together toward a common goal. In the end, all their efforts had paid off with the results they had hoped for. It seemed like Saya found it difficult to part ways with everyone. That night, Saya couldn't stop thinking about it. He lay on the couch when Aisu apologized for not being able to visit the amusement park. She asked if work had been tough, to which Saya replied that he had quit. Aisu was surprised and questioned why he had left so suddenly, expressing her disappointment since she believed Saya had enjoyed working there. She also mentioned that Saya had seemed much livelier since starting the job, a stark contrast to how he used to be. Before, Saya was always bored with everything, and she even wondered if he himself had realized it. The next day, Maikaroun and Tirami weren't feeling well due to exhaustion from the previous day. The fairies greeted the two of them, and Maikaroun and Tirami decided to take it easy for the day. But suddenly, Saya appeared and told them to stop complaining. They were shocked and asked if he hadn't already quit his job. However, it turned out that Saya had changed his mind. He even scolded them for slacking off after just a short absence and declared that he would be supervising them for the time being. Tirami called it oppression. Saya also told Malful that they would be busy again that day and urged him to get ready. Saya quickly changed into his uniform, looked at himself in the mirror, and confidently declared himself handsome and perfect. Isuzu, seeing him, was surprised and asked why he was still there. Saya explained that the park still had many issues to resolve, and if everyone started slacking off right after reaching their goal, the park could end up bankrupt in no time. He then asked about the day's schedule, and Isuzu informed him that the first activity was the morning assembly before the park opened. Saya told her to get ready to leave immediately. Saya met with Latifa and told her that he had decided to stay at the park because he just couldn't sit still while there were still problems left unresolved. With his usual confidence, he told everyone to be grateful since not many people would be willing to help like he was. That day, Saya encouraged all the staff and performers, urging them to give their all in entertaining the guests. Together, Saya and the others welcomed visitors to Amagi Brilliant Park. That day, Toriken showed Saya a video he had created. The video featured many visitors enjoying Amagi Brilliant Park, showcasing various attractions such as the roller coaster, Ferris wheel, spinning teacups, whack-a-mole game, carousel, and several other rides. The video also captured visitors delighting in the delicious croquettes made by Latifa. Additionally, it highlighted the vast and grand scale of Amagi Brilliant Park from an aerial view, along with the breathtaking nighttime scenery filled with dazzling lights and fireworks. The video ended with the Amagi Brilliant Park logo appearing on the screen. The plan was to use this as a promotional video, PV, for the amusement park. After watching it together, Toriken eagerly asked Saya for his thoughts on the PV he had put his heart and soul into creating. Saya responded that the PV was pretty standard, not bad, but also not particularly great. The issue, he pointed out, was that the video lacked impact. Saya suspected that Toriken's naturally dull personality was the root of the problem. Toriken then hesitantly asked if that meant the video was unusable. Saya made it clear that he couldn't approve a video like that. The core elements were all there, but the presentation was just too boring. He concluded that a dull person would naturally produce dull work, and the video was proof of that. Toriken muttered under his breath that it was no wonder Saya had no friends. Saya brushed off the comment, saying that his role as a manager kept him extremely busy, and he didn't have time for trivial matters like this. He then asked Isuzu to assist Toriken in improving the PV. Isuzu hesitated, explaining that she had no experience in video production. Saya insisted that even so would be better than leaving the project solely in Toriken's hands. He also told her to gather ideas from the other employees and that he would review the final result himself. Isuzu admitted to Toriken that she had no knowledge of video making and wasn't even sure what was lacking in the video. However, she agreed that it failed to leave a strong impression. She then suggested that they ask for input from their colleagues. First, they approached Mawful. Mawful commented that the video was, as expected, standard. All the essential elements were there, but the presentation was dull. He also remarked that a boring person naturally creates boring work. Toriken, feeling dejected, said that Mawful was just as harsh as Saya. Mawful then pointed out that the video lacked action and suggested replacing the fireworks scene with an explosion. He even demonstrated the kind of scene he had in mind, gathering gasoline, causing a massive explosion, making a dramatic escape, and wrapping it up with an intense battle scene, all leading up to the grand reveal of the park's logo. Toriken hesitantly responded that such an approach seemed a bit too over-the-top for a family-friendly park. Mawful shrugged it off and told him to just go with it. Toriken then created a new version of the video. It started with a car speeding away from a massive explosion, followed by a scene where Mawful took down enemies with his deadly punches. The action escalated as Makaran, the sharpshooter, fired at a mafia boss, and the video concluded with a dramatic explosion set off by the famed beast, Tirami. Toriken then turned to Isuzu for her thoughts on the revised version. Isuzu admitted she didn't fully understand video production, but she felt that the new video was much more impactful, especially with its intense explosion scene. She encouraged him to keep that aspect in. Next, Toriken sought Makaron's opinion on the updated video. Makaron commented that while it had improved, it still didn't capture the essence of his musical theater. He suggested making the visuals and audio even more dynamic. Following that, Toriken consulted Tirami for feedback. Tirami responded that the video still lacked sensual appeal and needed a touch of eroticism. Surprisingly, Toriken agreed with the idea. Tirami suggested that Toriken should add mini skirts, swimsuits, and low-angle shots so they could include as much as possible without breaking any laws. Toriken pointed out that they didn't have enough funds to hire models. Tirami then revealed that she had a collection of valuable photos, secretly taken sexy pictures, and handed them over to Toriken for editing material. That night, Toriken worked on the video with great enthusiasm. The next day, he showed his finished product to Isuzu. The video featured scenes of Makaran playing rock music, followed by images of women's bodies. Isuzu commented that if the goal was to attract a male audience, she had no objections, but honestly, it looked disgusting. Toriken thanked her for the feedback. Isuzu also noticed that the skirts and swimsuits in the video looked familiar, but Toriken insisted that they belonged to hired models. She told him to keep that part, but also to make sure the video appealed to more than just men. She suggested that Toriken get input from the female employees as well. Toriken then approached the fairies to ask for their opinions on the video. They immediately felt that something was off. They called the video disgusting since it relied entirely on sexual appeal. Toriken asked if they had any suggestions. Komura pointed out that there weren't enough male models, making the video feel bland. She suggested including scenes that showcase men's skin, swimsuits, arm and chest muscles. Muse requested some water-themed visuals that reflected her element as they could bring a sense of tranquility. She even provided Toriken with videos of rivers, oceans, and similar landscapes. Salama also had something special for him, a secret recording of Muse sleeping, which she had taken while staying over at her house. Muse immediately demanded that Salama delete all the footage, but instead, Salama sent it to Toriken and told him to use it however he wanted. Toriken thanked her and promised to make the best use of it. Sophie also shared a video of herself dancing for him to include. Taking all these suggestions into account, Toriken edited the video once again and presented it to Isuzu. She asked if he had hired the male models for the new version. Toriken admitted that he still lacked the budget to hire professionals, so he asked security staff like Okuro, along with some newly recruited part-timers to help out. Isuzu questioned whether Toriken had really considered all of his options, suggesting that there were plenty of attractive men he could have asked for help. However, when Toriken pressed her to name someone specific, she hesitated and changed the subject. Toriken immediately suspected that she was referring to Saya. Isuzu quickly shut him down, telling him to be quiet. Toriken laughed and teased her, prompting Isuzu to threaten him with her musket. Isuzu then asked whether their promotional video really needed footage of a river and a sleeping Muse. In her opinion, Sylphie would be a much better fit. Toriken found her suggestion surprising. Isuzu encouraged him to gather feedback from even more people and reminded him that he still hadn't consulted the most important person, Latifa. Toriken then went to Latifa for her input on the video. She admitted that she didn't know much about the subject, but Toriken encouraged her to share anything she wanted to see in the video. Instead, Latifa suggested using the opportunity to showcase footage of their friends hard at work. Following her advice, Toriken sought out Teramo, who handed him some tapes to use. He then visited Niku in the kitchen and asked to record him working, but Niku dismissed it as too much of a hassle. Next, he approached Wrench, hoping to film him on the job, but Wrench snapped at him, saying he was too busy to be bothered. Riken visited the security post and recorded the security officers, showcasing their work, training, and other activities. Hen approached Ashi to film her job, but she was unsure how to present accounting work. Tan suggested that any video showing their true selves, even daily routines, would be suitable. Next met with Rubrum to request a video, but Rubrum offered an old-school video instead. Torikyo proceeded to ask Dornell if he had any memorable videos for the promotional video, PV. Dornell eyed a video he had taken with friends. Toriken approached Jack, who mentioned he could go on adventures when not working. After that, Ket met with Tetsubige and Genjuro. Genjuro felt that PV lacked the spirit of Bushido, while Tetsubige requested to be featured in it. Toriken also is with Mireille, who stated that what the Earth needs is love. Finally, Toriken consulted Godane for his ideas. Toriken edited a patient of all his friends' videos, starting with the Diggory's clan showcasing their prowess operating heavy machinery, followed by Niku's tutorial on meat slicing, Wrench expressing anger when disturbed security officers wrestling, Ashi ironing while skydiving, Dornell and friends near a dam, Rubrum participating in his school's tea club, Jack horseback riding, Genjuro and Tetsubige depicting a samurai harakiri, waste management scenes, and Godane floating in the sky. Isuzu admitted she did fully understand the video, but thought it was acceptable. She inquired about Ash activity in the video, and Toriken explained that Ashi was doing extreme ironing under the sun, an activity she seemed to enjoy. Isuzu also asked about Dole's connection to the dam. Toriken mentioned that Dornell appeared to be part of a dam enthusiast community. Isuzu noted that the video is valuable to those who contributed it, but felt it was still lacking. She suggested that Toriken ask new employees with a guest-oriented perspective. Toriken then met with Biano for video suggestions. She felt the scenes lacked bloodshed and needed more, as humans are usually sensitive to scary things, and she believed guests would appreciate it. Toriken also consulted Shina. Thought the PV was good but had no further comments. When Toriken approached Aiko, she pet the video but felt it lacked an emotional touch. Toriken asked what kind of emotional Aiko meant. Eiko shared that she had been passionate about horseback riding since childhood and recently witnessed a horse named Kikuno Scepter, whom she had known since high school, give birth. She was deeply moved by the horse's strength effort to become a mother. That night, Toriken worked overtime to create a PV incorporating his friend's feedback and completed it. The PV created by Toriken featured a sequence of Makar dodging attacks, interspersed with scenes of excited visitors enjoying the amusement park rides. It also included suggestive images between each transition. The video showcased various clips: the Digger clan operating heavy machinery, Macaron rocking out with his music, security officers wrestling, Maulful battling enemies, Macaron shooting Wannabe, the mafia boss, a massive explosion caused by tyranny, Asha ironing while skydiving, Dornell and his friends near a dam, Jack horseback riding, Genjuro Harakiri, views of acidic waste and scrap metal, a scenic river, Muse peacefully asleep, Sophie dancing, a group of Ramus watching Macaron's concert, Niku's tutorial on chopping meat, Wrench raging in anger, Jack falling off his horse, Rubrum hanging out with his club friends, Godane floating in the sky, Wannabe covered in blood after being shot in battle, and Ayeko's horse giving birth with the help of two people pulling the foal out, struggling through the process. Once the foal was finally born, they rejoiced. The video ended with the Amayi Brilliant Park logo. After watching the video, Saya was completely dumbfounded, unable to comprehend what kind of PV Toriken had put together. Frustrated, he scolded Isuzu for not properly supervising the project. However, Isuzu was deeply moved and even brought to tears, saying that the PV beautifully captured everyone's dreams. She then asked if there was anything wrong with it. Saya responded that the video was simply not normal. Ultimately, Saya preferred the initial PV that Toriken had made, which featured guests enjoying the amusement park attractions. When the new PV was played in front of the park's staff, they all began commenting. Maulful complained that the action was still lacking. Dornell searched for the scene with the dam. Macaron pointed out that the real issue was the music, and Taramo questioned where the Digger clan's display of strength had gone. Wannabe was disappointed that his prize collection wasn't included and even asked why they didn't consult him for suggestions. Despite their complaints, Saya ignored them, firmly believing that the revised PV was far better than Toriken's latest creation. However, Toriken then revealed that he had already uploaded the PV featuring everyone's clips onto the internet. Saya was shocked when he saw that the video had surpassed 1 million views, unable to believe what he was witnessing. That day, while Isuzu was enjoying a relaxing bath, her phone suddenly rang. It was a call from Macaron, who said he wanted to stop by and talk to her about something. Isuzu suddenly remembered that it was Saya's birthday that day and she had already prepared a gift for him. That morning, Isuzu walked into Saya's room while he was admiring himself in the mirror, calling himself cool. Isuzu asked if he never got tired of doing that, but Saya confidently said he would never get bored of praising himself. He also complained that the air conditioning still wasn't working. Isuzu informed him that the scheduled maintenance would start tomorrow. She was about to give Saya his gift, but just as she was about to say something, the phone rang. It was Latifa, calling Saya to come to the castle immediately. Isuzu hesitated, feeling nervous, and ended up not giving him the present. Suddenly, she received a text from Muse asking for her help in the dressing room. Meanwhile, Maulful was getting dressed in a suit and bowtie, which surprised Macaron and Tirami. Maulful explained that he would be working at Waku Waku Kindergarten for the day. The kindergarten event was held once a year, and he would be supervising 3 part-time workers during their duties. Tirami commented that it would be a tough challenge for Maulful. Before leaving, Maulful reminded Macaron and Tirami to take care of the park while he was gone. Then he asked about the plans for that evening. Macaron assured him that everything was set. He had made a reservation at an Italian restaurant that had delicious food at a reasonable price. Meanwhile, Muse apologized for calling Isuzu to the dressing room. Isuzu asked what was wrong, and Muse explained that she had a stiff neck from sleeping in the wrong position. At the same time, Tirami went to the security post and asked Okuro to wear Maulful's costume to entertain the guests. But the problem was that Okuro's leg shape didn't quite fit the suit. That morning, Maulful gathered Eiko, Bina, and Shayna for roll call before they left together. Eiko asked what kind of work they would be doing that day. Maulful explained that they would be working outside the park in the city of Amagi at Waku Waku Kindergarten. He added that if the kids liked them, the kindergarten might organize an autumn parade. Just as they were about to leave, Maulful suddenly remembered that the gifts meant for the kindergarten children were still in his office. He asked Biana to go get them, and she immediately ran off to retrieve them. Meanwhile, Latifa handed Saya a document from the Maple Land Sanctuary Funding Committee that she had prepared. Saya thanked her, saying that he should have sent Ashe for such tasks, but Latifa explained that she wanted to do it herself and was happy to help. Suddenly, Saya received a message from Isuzu informing him that Muse had a stiff neck from sleeping wrong. Saya told Latifa about it, realizing that this meant Muse wouldn't be able to perform on stage. At the same time, Biena arrived at the office, but no one was there. She searched for the gift Malful had mentioned but accidentally grabbed the gift that Isuzu had prepared for Saya instead. Meanwhile, Okuro was sweating inside the Malful costume while standing among the guests. A child even pointed out to his mother that he could see a person inside the suit. Biena then rushed over and handed the gift she had picked up at the office to Malful. Malful felt like it was smaller than he remembered, but they hurried off to their assignment. The Elementario stage show was temporarily closed due to a missing performer and would resume once everything was ready. Saya and Latifa went to the dressing room to meet the fairies, and Saya offered a solution. He suggested that Latifa take over Isuzu's duties, Muse temporarily replace Latifa, and Isuzu take Muse's place. He explained that Isuzu was good at sports, Latifa could handle the documents Isuzu usually worked on, and this arrangement would allow Muse to rest properly. Saya and Latifa were confident they could handle the task well, but Muse felt uncomfortable wearing the princess outfit. Salama commented that Latifa playing Isuzu didn't seem like a good fit. Latifa then entrusted the croquette-making task to Muse, suggesting that she could also ask Niku for help. At that moment, Makarao and his band had just finished performing their rock music set. Suddenly, the restaurant called him, asking him to cancel the dinner reservation he had made earlier. Makarao was furious and demanded to know why. Meanwhile, Okuro was struggling with the intense heat inside the Malful costume under the blazing sun. He collapsed, drenched in sweat, soaking his clothes. The surrounding guests immediately gathered around and started taking pictures. Meanwhile, Malful and the others arrived at Waku Waku Kindergarten, where the children eagerly welcomed them with excitement. The teacher seemed doubtful about the 3 girls Malful had brought along, but Malful reassured her, saying this was a great opportunity for their part-time workers. Suddenly, 3 koala mascots from another amusement park appeared and arrogantly declared that they would be the ones hosting the autumn hiking event. They were representatives from Tama Cartland. Malful informed the 3 part-time girls that those koalas were their rivals. The teacher then led all the children to the Waku Waku Coliseum. Meanwhile, Saya handed over some documents for Latifa to work on. He also instructed her to set aside anything related to Animus. Saya asked if Latifa could endure the heat in the room since the AC was still broken. It turned out Latifa had brought a cold air generator to keep herself cool, but Saya didn't feel any effect from it at all. Latifa suspected that the cold air generator might not work on regular humans. She assured Saya that she was very meticulous in her work and even suggested that he work elsewhere if he found the heat unbearable. Trusting her, Saya left everything in Latifa's hands and she immediately began her tasks. Meanwhile, Isuzu was practicing her role as Muse, the water fairy, mimicking Muse's stage movements. Dornell pointed out that Isuzu's expression was still lacking and asked her to repeat the performance. That day, Muse was at the castle, sipping tea on the rooftop. She felt at peace being there. Niku then arrived to teach her how to make croquettes. Malful and the 3 part-time girls stood inside Waku Waku Kindergarten's Coliseum, ready to face their opponents. The children were buzzing with excitement, eager for the match to begin. The teacher explained that the philosophy of education at Waku Waku Kindergarten was about fighting and overcoming challenges. If they wanted to host the autumn hiking event, they had to defeat their opponents. Malful told the part-time girls that they had to take down their enemies because that was the standard in the business. The first round featured Aiko against King Crimson. Before the battle started, King Crimson put on a fire-breathing display, sending the kindergartners into a frenzy. Meanwhile, the number of visitors at Amagi Brilliant Park continued to grow. Other staff members took turns wearing the Malful costume to replace Okuro, while Macaron was busy trying to make a new dinner reservation. Tirami was tending to the exhausted Okuro in the student infirmary. Back at the Waku Waku Coliseum, the match began. Aiko looked terrified as King Crimson, now transformed into a menacing figure, charged at her. As the audience cheered, 3 mischievous boys suddenly caught a whiff of Isuzu's scent. They quickly realized that the source was the gift Isuzu had prepared for Seiya, which Malful was carrying. The boys immediately made their way toward the package. Malful explained that King Crimson, the red panda, was usually friendly and well-behaved but became completely uncontrollable when provoked. In the end, King Crimson managed to tackle Aiko, securing victory for himself in the first round. With that, Aiko lost the first match. At that moment, Latifa was finishing up a box full of documents. After that, the phone rang, asking her to find the parade fund documents. Isuzu switched roles to become Kobori, but Dornell thought it was pointless because Isuzu still seemed stiff. Meanwhile, Muse started making croquettes and had to chop so many onions all by herself. Saya was working in another room, but it seemed like the room was too crowded with employees, which disrupted his concentration, so he moved to another place. The match in the Coliseum entered the second round, where Bino was facing off against Grand Blue. Grand Blue transformed into a monster and began chasing Bino. According to Moffel, Grand Blue, the blue koala, should have a calm and mysterious character, but when disturbed, he loses control. Bino suddenly fell and Grand Blue prepared to catch her, but when he saw blood on Bino's head, he fainted instead. It turned out that Grand Blue was afraid of seeing blood, so Bino won the second round. Bino cheered with joy and Moffel couldn't believe she won. The three mischievous boys opened a gift box, which turned out to contain a watch. They replaced it with an insect. Meanwhile, Macaron still couldn't book a dinner reservation for the event later. Latifa, who was filling in for Isuzu, was extremely busy at that moment. Torikin wondered why Latifa was the one handling it. Wrench came in and asked why the room was so crowded, and Torikin explained that it seemed like they were just busy. Isuzu was practicing for her role as Sophie, but Dornell thought it was terrible and asked her to do it again. By then, Muse had finished chopping a whole box of onions. Nika came in to pick them up and brought potatoes with him, asking Muse to peel them all by herself. Meanwhile, Mayor Chan was organizing some ordered items in the warehouse. Saya, who was working there, was once again disturbed because the place was filled with stuff. The Waku Waku Coliseum battle entered round 3, where Sheena would face off against Say Gold. The match began and Say Gold immediately chased Sheena in a terrifying form. Sheena screamed in fear and ran while Moffel remarked that Say Gold was unique, but when disturbed, he loses control. Say Gold was fighting with chains, but unfortunately, he ended up getting caught by his own chains while trying to attack Sheena. All the kindergarten kids cheered and Sheena won the third round. Kita, the mischievous kid, wrapped up his gift again. The teacher thanked Moffel and the others and looked forward to the autumn parade from Amagi Brilliant Park. The teacher then gave the gift to Moffel, and Sheena remarked, "Isn't that gift for the kindergarten kids?" But it turned out that this was the tradition. The contestants always brought their own prizes. Meanwhile, Hashi saw the line in front of Isuzu's room. It turned out that they were waiting to collect documents, and Latifa was still overwhelmed trying to find them. Ashi offered to help her. At that time, Isuzu was still practicing. She tried to rehearse her role as Salama, but Dornell said her performance was really bad. Isuzu had tried all the roles, and at this rate, it might end up spending the whole day practicing and not actually working, even though it was getting late. Saya, who had been disturbed while working in a few different places that day, eventually moved to the restroom. But even in the restroom, you couldn't find any peace while trying to work. Muse was peeling a huge amount of potatoes all by herself, and she wasn't even sure if she could finish it on her own. It was already dark outside, and Moffel and the 3 part-time girls had returned to the amusement park. Moffel asked Bino to put the gift in the office. Meanwhile, Latifa finally finished all her work and felt exhausted. She needed to find Saya to inform him about the customer. As Bino was heading to the office, she ran into Latifa and greeted her. The gift was then placed on Isuzu's desk. Saya was working in the player's room when Moffel greeted him and asked why he was working there. Saya explained that the AC in the office was broken. Moffel mentioned that he had successfully organized the autumn parade and that the 3 part-time workers had done a great job, asking Saya to congratulate them. In the changing room, Latifa, Muse, and Isuzu met to change clothes. They thanked each other for their cooperation that day. Muse said that working like usual was actually the best approach. Isuzu mentioned that the day had been very tiring. She quickly returned to her room and saw 2 gifts on her desk, meaning the work at the Waku Waku kindergarten had gone smoothly that day. Latifa and Isuzu then approached Saya and asked him to come with them. It turned out that they had all prepared a surprise birthday celebration for Saya. The employees of Amagi Brilliant Park all wished him a happy birthday, and Saya was shocked. Terumi pointed out that Saya's face looked embarrassed, but Saya didn't admit it. He thanked everyone, and they all laughed at Saya's expression. Latifa actually knew about it, but the others had asked her not to tell him. They all had dinner together to celebrate Saya's birthday. Terumi wondered and asked Macaron why he chose Nagashi Somen. Macaron explained that it was the only menu item left. After dinner, they had a sake party, and the atmosphere was so joyful. Salama revealed a photo of Okuro, who appeared to have wet himself, but in reality, he was just sweating from the heat earlier that afternoon. They continued the party by eating birthday cake together, chatting and enjoying each other's company. They didn't forget to keep Rubrun company while he ate his cake outside because of his large size. After the party, Seiya still couldn't believe he was celebrating his birthday with his friends. He told Isuzu that this was the first time he had ever experienced a birthday like this. Saya was amazed because even though everyone was busy, they still managed to organize this event. Saya mentioned that Latifa had given him a candle gift. Isuzu said that she also had a gift for Saya, although it might not be much, but she was sure he would need it. Isuzu handed over her gift and quickly left. Saya was surprised when he opened the gift and found an insect shell inside.